The Goths were not a single, compact nation in the modern sense, but a network of groups and coalitions that, over time, were called and learned to call themselves by that name. Their origins are therefore a mix of constructed identity, tribal memories, and archaeological reality. Late antique traditions speak of a distant northern homeland and a migration toward the Baltic. But what we can say with greater confidence is that between the 1st and 3rd centuries AD, various Germanic groups moved and reorganized along the major trade routes and river corridors of Eastern Europe, gradually gravitating toward the regions north of the Black Sea. This is where the Goths truly enter Rome's radar. The 3rd century sees an escalation of raids, frontier wars, and negotiations in a constant swing between conflict and cooperation, because the empire does not view them only as raiders, but also as potential allies, mercenaries, federates, and military manpower to integrate or to contain. The Great Earthquake arrives around 370, when pressure from the Huns destabilizes the entire steppe world and sweeps away already fragile balances. Many Gothic communities collapse, submit, flee, or seek safety within Roman borders. In 376, a massive body of Goths crosses the Danube seeking asylum. This is not the simple image of an invading army, but the more complex and more dangerous reality of an armed migration with families, leaders, warriors, and urgent needs. Roman management is disastrous, marked by corruption, abuse, and famine, and the tension explodes into revolt. In 378, at Adrianople, the Roman army suffers a catastrophic defeat, and Emperor Valens is killed. It is not the end of Rome on that day, but it is a psychological and strategic rupture, because it proves the empire can lose irreparably against a large, organized barbarian bloc. In 382, a compromise is reached. The Goths are settled as federates on imperial territory, receiving land and a form of recognition in exchange for military service. It is a pragmatic solution, but also a dangerous precedent, because it consolidates within the empire an armed power that is not fully absorbed into Roman structures. From this crucible emerges the most famous split, Visigoths and Ostrogoths, two major political trajectories that are not two peoples separated from the beginning, but different evolutions of Gothic coalitions in different contexts. The Visigoths become major players in the West. After Theodosius's death and the crisis of the imperial system, leaders like Alaric rise, and after years of pressure and failed negotiations, he reaches the symbolic act of 410, the sack of Rome. Rome was no longer the administrative capital of power, but it remained the emotional and ideological capital of power. And seeing it violated means realizing the Roman world is changing its skin. In the decades that follow, the Visigoths shift from being a mobile problem to a territorial power. They settle in southwestern Gaul, first as federates and then increasingly as an autonomous kingdom with its capital at Toulouse. And under rulers like Euric, they build institutions and an authority that no longer truly depends on Rome. The turning point comes in 507 with defeat against the Franks at Vouillé. They lose most of their holdings in Gaul, and the kingdom's center of gravity shifts definitively to Hispania, where Toledo becomes the political heart. There, the Visigoths rule a population that is largely Hispano-Roman and must confront the problem of integration. For a long time, the Gothic elite follows forms of Arian Christianity, while many local communities are Catholic, and this divide is political as well. In 589, with King Reccared's conversion to Catholicism, the kingdom takes a decisive step toward greater internal cohesion, even if it does not eliminate rivalries among nobility, church, and crown. In the 7th century, the Visigothic kingdom appears as a mature state, capable of producing law and administration. A symbol of this phase is the Liber Judiciarum, a major legislative body in Latin that blends Roman inheritances and post-Roman realities and would continue to influence Iberian legal tradition. The political end comes in 711. A kingdom worn down by internal struggles and contested successions is overwhelmed by the Muslim invasion. Central authority collapses rapidly, and King Roderick dies in the conflict. The end of the Visigoths does not mean the instant disappearance of people, because many elites reorganize or integrate, and some areas resist. But as a state structure, that world breaks apart. The Ostrogoths, by contrast, have their most famous arc in Italy. After being hit by the Hunnic crisis and after decades of readjustment within the orbit of the Eastern Empire, under Theodoric, they conquer the peninsula in 493 and rule until 526. Seeking a delicate balance, preserving many Roman structures and partly separating civil functions, more Romanized, from the military function, more Gothic. It is an attempt at Rome with a barbarian king that works for a time, but stability depends too much on one person and on a fragile compromise. After Theodoric's death, Emperor Justinian decides on reconquest. The Gothic War, 535 to 554, becomes a long and devastating conflict that drains Italy, destroys local economies, and shatters communities. In the end, the Ostrogoths cease to exist as an autonomous political entity. And yet, the story of the Goths does not end overnight. There are long afterlives and residual identities, such as those linked to the Crimean Goths. Above all, their imprint remains in the transition from the Roman world to the medieval one, because the Goths are not only those who destroyed Rome, but also one of the main gears of transformation. First inside the empire as federates and soldiers, then as kingdoms that preserved and reshaped Roman elements, law, administrative language, cities, taxation, the church, within a new political reality that was no longer imperial, but was not barbaric in the simple, caricatured sense either.